Hey everyone, and welcome to the Not a Blur e-commerce show. I'm Rock. I spent the last 20 years in e-commerce, built e-commerce businesses to 50 million per year. And sitting next to me is Jason, the founder at Defiance and a true expert on maximizing customer value, which is exactly what we'll be discussing today. Hey Jason, really happy to have you here.
Hey Rock, it's great to be here.
So before we dig into it, do you want to do a short 15, 30-second intro of what you do, what you believe in, what your experience is?
Sure. So my background, I've been in agency for probably longer than I care to admit. And I built an agency that I sold back in 2017. It wasn't in e-commerce, it was in branding and marketing. And I came out of that vowing that I would never do it again because it was super stressful and having employees was hard and all of these things. And then went and worked in a load of different sectors as an employee. And then I found myself in e-commerce. And it was like I felt I'd come home. And the deeper I got into e-commerce, the more I wanted to dig into the strategy side of things and the growth piece because there's so much data that ticked a lot of boxes for me. So I worked at a couple of Shopify Plus agencies here in the UK before starting Defiant, which is a customer value optimization agency. Basically, we specialize in strategic growth for D2C merchants.
Well, beautiful. And then, yeah, it seems that then, that's right now with rising customer acquisition costs and our pending or looming or maybe already here recession, customer retention and customer value are really becoming everyone's favorite new words. Okay, probably sometimes in combination with customer lifetime value, cost of customer acquisition, things like that. But it does seem that the times have changed a bit, at least in comparison to previous growth times. It is now a bit more into profit and customer value and those things. So I guess that means that business for you must be booming.
Well, business is new right now. So I started the business in January 2023. So we're about 4 months in. But I think the market's definitely coming towards me in that respect. Like you say, I think there's a lot of conversation around profit in particular that prior to 2020, there was a big focus on just acquiring customers, growing market share. You didn't have to be particularly profitable. VCs and private equity weren't massively interested or concerned about profit. They just wanted somebody who was on an enormous sort of growth trajectory. And this year, like you say, with acquisition costs having gone up, we're now post iOS 14. Cookies are becoming a problem. Customer data is becoming an issue. Acquisition costs are going through the roof. And then behind that, you've got, kind of global economic picture that is not particularly brilliant. And it doesn't matter where in the world you are, you're feeling some kind of forces from that. That brands are switching on to, okay, hang on a second. How do I make sure that I'm profitable as a business? Because if I'm not profitable, I'm going to die. Whereas before, it didn't really matter. You were going to grow regardless. Now it's a case of sink or swim. And I think people are desperately trying to grab the life vests, and that life vest is profit.
Yeah. Regardless of the times, whether good or bad, and even if by some miracle acquisition costs would go down sometime in the future, right? Customer retention should always be a priority for all of us. It's just, hey, it's good. It's good for business. But yeah, if more companies jump on the customer retention bandwagon right now because of the hard times, because the times have changed a bit, and I'm pretty sure, by the way, that they will change back. So in about a year or 2 years, it will again be all about growth. Profit will take a back seat again, and then it will change again. But yeah, if more companies start working on that today, and that creates a more meaningful long-term change, hey, it's really only a good thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where customer value optimization really starts to come to the fore, because it gives you the ability to be able to pull those levers, whether you want pure growth and are happy to sacrifice profit for it, or whether you are actually in a position where you need money in the bank and you need to make some profit. It gives you the visibility on all of that data to be able to make those decisions, rather than just being swept along by the current. You can start to decide what's going to work for your business and where you are. It doesn't matter where other businesses are. I hate benchmarks. I hate all of these other things, because everybody's running their own race. If you can leverage your own data for your own purposes, growth, profit, retaining more customers, acquiring more customers, then you're in the driving seat and you're not a passenger anymore.
And I suggest we jump straight into that. So I know that you talk a lot about, and that the key ingredients in maximizing customer retention is really just getting better customers with higher probability to repurchase again. Can you take us through that process and how you actually do that?
Every merchant is going to have to start with acquisition. Whether you're starting out or whether you are an established brand, you need to acquire customers. End of story. And you're always going to need to acquire new customers. But as a startup, you face different problems than you do when you're an established brand. An established brand has some luxuries at its disposal, such as they have prior sales, they've got customer data, all of these things. They've kind of built their gold mine, and they now just have to be able to go in there and mine for those nuggets of gold that are sitting in there, that they are all sitting on. As a startup, you've got a slightly different challenge, in the sense that you don't have customer data that you're sitting on. So your efforts are going to be focused a lot, more broadly on general and generic acquisition. But once you've brought people in and started making sales, you have so much data to be able to inform future acquisition. And for me, all of the keys to acquisition and acquiring better customers all lie in your retention data. So any sales that you've made previously, any customers that you've had in the past, it doesn't matter whether it was yesterday, 6 months ago, or 6 years ago, it's all valuable. And you can start to mine that to look for a thread of information, consistencies between all of those customers that are going to help direct your acquisition efforts.
So can you give us a couple of specific examples, maybe?
So I mean, for me, when I start working with a merchant, the one thing I want to do first and foremost is I want to understand what their ideal customer profile is. And they probably have multiple profiles. I want to understand what their customer lifetime values are. And that's more than one value, because each segment is going to have its own value. And I want to understand what they're buying and why. So I want to dig into that retention data, and I want to take a look at it and say, okay, let's break these people out. Rather than treating everybody exactly the same, I'm going to treat each segment differently based upon their RFM score. So their recency, their frequency, and their monetary value. So how often they buy, how recently they've bought, and how much they're spending. And that's going to give me an aggregated score for each of those segments. And we can start to really dissect them into something quite small if there's a lot of people and a lot of data, or we can be quite broad and quite generic if there's not a whole ton. Then within each of those segments, I want to then look at lifetime value and all of these sorts of things. Once I know that data, I can then start to feed that back into my acquisition loop. So I can say, here, Google, Facebook, wherever I'm spending my money, I want an audience that looks like this. Here's my lookalike audience. demographics, race, gender, location. It kind of doesn't matter. If it's relevant to your brand, use it. And then this is how much they're worth to me. So this is how much I'm prepared to spend. And really, I look for a ratio, a healthy ratio between customer lifetime value and customer acquisition cost. And if we're talking about profit, I want that to be about 3 to 1. So for every $1 I'm spending on my acquisition, I want $3 in lifetime value.
And when you lifetime value, sorry to jump in, I guess you're not talking about, because it seems that lifetime value is one of those metrics that everyone is talking about, and it seems that almost everyone is looking at it the wrong way. Because you can say lifetime value, and you're thinking, okay, that's like 5-10 years, but you could actually die of cash flow misnourishment while waiting for those customers to actually buy in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So for me, it's really all about looking at velocity to next purchase, looking at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, maybe 1 year at most, unless, of course, you're a huge brand with a lot of money in the bank that can also bank on post 1 year purchases. But
yeah, I think you have to look at your buying cycles. You have to look at your cash position as a business. How long can you sustain the business without customers buying? And obviously that's on a continual basis. It's moving all the time. But I think you're right to look at it on, okay, what does it look like in 30 days? Do we have products that people are coming back and either repurchasing or purchasing a supplementary or a secondary product within a month? If not, then we need to look at a longer period. And then you can probably start to aggregate some of those numbers. So each one of those is going to be different, 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months, 12 months. But it's about applying what's right for each individual business. And this is where benchmarking and all of these sorts of things, they're averages, and they hide so many numbers. And it's the same with one customer lifetime value number. That takes into account, your highest value customer and also your lowest value customer, and it's going to give you something in the middle, which is maybe not representative, because maybe 80% of your customer base is sitting in that lower value area, but the numbers being inflated by the people at the top, or vice versa. So averages are really dangerous, and I think this is where you have to be able to spend time and dedicate time digging into your data to make it relevant and make it work for you. Because I think so many brands are looking at one number, conversion rate or average order value, and you're getting a very two-dimensional representation of what's happening in your business. But when you start to layer the metrics one on top of the other, then you start to get a real feel for where the business is and where you need to invest and where you need to scale back some of your spending.
Okay, but Jason, so how often when you're working with clients to get into a situation where essentially you need to go back to them and tell them, well, look, guys, I can fix your retention tactics and all of that stuff, but won't really do that much of a change because, number one, your customer satisfaction sucks. So you need to do something to fix the product, the experience, the service. And number two, you're just not selling products with, I call this high enough purchase, repurchase feasibility. And you just also need to do something on that part of the portfolio. So you might need to either increase your portfolio and go and add those categories. For example, if you're in fashion, you might need to add a few more consumables. You might need to, if you're just selling, I don't know, supplements or beauty, just short-term treatments that customers use once for a month and then never again. Maybe you need to add some more products. So how do you then work with clients also on these strategic questions that most people usually just think, well, yeah, our business is built for repeatability. But in reality, it has 0 reviews, bad reviews, poor products, bad customer satisfaction, no repeatable products. How do you handle that?
Well, this is really where I kind of come into play for so many brands. So already in existence, brands usually have an acquisition agency. They usually have a design and dev agency, and they probably usually have a retention agency, email marketing or Klaviyo specialists or whatever kind of US email service provider that they might be using. And I come in and I kind of layer myself over the top of that. So I touch every part of the life cycle and provide a holistic view of what is going on within that business. So, and this is part of the reason I started Defiant, was because I think lots of agencies, regardless of what sphere they're in or vertical they're in, they're trying to own part of the strategy, but the strategy only works when it's an overarching strategy. You can be strategic in your area, but you need somebody or something to tie all of that together. And traditionally, brands might look at an e-com director to do that, or a CMO, or somebody like that. But the reality is that those people, they have so much to do. If they have them in place, they have so much to do, and they're spread pretty thin. Or the business is not at a point where they have budget for those sorts of people, or have employed those sorts of people. So I come in and look at the entire value chain and say, okay, this is what your acquisition data looks like. This is what your customer experience and conversion data looks like. This is what your retention data looks like. But behind all of that, what do your unit economics look like? What's your gross margin per product? What are the hero products? What are the toxic products that, are kind of the antithesis of what that hero product is, where people will come on and buy that and they're super happy and they'll come back and buy it again. That toxic product is the product that people buy and then they never come back. So every merchant has a poor performing product. They might not have a toxic product, but they have poor performing products that they need to either just sell their stock out and not replenish and stop selling, or they need to find a different way of packaging that up and giving it to their customers so that it's relevant. And all of that plays towards retaining a customer, because if you've bought something and it's crap quality, or it's not what you're expecting, or your experience was bad, or you came in via an acquisition channel and the kind of experience that you had wasn't what you expected from that acquisition piece, you were sold something, you bought into something from an acquisition perspective, and then it didn't turn out to be quite what you wanted, either on site or physically when you received the product, then somebody's got to tie all of that together. And this is where I come in and look at that in a more holistic way, and keep all of those agencies honest. Do you know what I mean?
Now tell me, if you were to break this down into more of a step-by-step process, how do you then actually address all of these points and make sure that you're actually getting the right answer? So like, for example, a toxic product. So a toxic product could be, like you said, the result of over-promising on Facebook ads, and then the product just not being able to deliver that, or it could actually be a crappy product that ruins the customer experience. So how do you make sure that you actually get the right answers, right insights, and what is your process for getting there?
So I run, data analysis continually, broadly, in various channels and metrics. And when I see changes in those, that gives me a direction where I need to look. It's like going to the doctor and saying, my elbow hurts. Okay, well, you've given me at somewhere where I need to start looking, but I'm now going to dig into that and I'm going to find where the pain's really coming from. So you're feeling it quite generally, in an area. Now I'm going to keep pressing and probing until I can find the source of that pain. So really honing in all the time and looking for where's the problem or where's the opportunity, because a problem presents opportunity. You can fix it. So where do I need to? What's the treatment that we need to prescribe in order to fix this? Using the medical analogy, I could give you some painkillers, and it will stop you feeling the pain, but it doesn't solve the problem. We're just treating the symptoms. So I had to dig into what's causing that at the very seed of the problem, and then we can fix it. So
Identifying the root cause of what's causing the issue.
absolutely, and all the data's there. This is I think where it maybe starts to feel overwhelming, or is difficult for brands to get their head around. All the data's sitting there. They have all of the data. They're sitting on it. Maybe it's in customer reviews. Maybe it's in purchase history. Maybe it's in your returns data. Maybe people just aren't buying certain things. Maybe the key does lie in your acquisition data, that maybe you have a really, an ad that's performing really well in terms of driving traffic, but the conversion on it's really poor. So, okay, let's dig into why that is, because people are obviously attracted to it when they're seeing that ad. Why aren't they converting? Is there a problem with customer experience? Is there a problem with messaging? Is there a problem with the product? Are there friction points that people are feeling? Is there an education piece that's missing? Do they understand what the product is or does, or the benefits to them? All of these things then we can just start to work through in terms of a checklist, and it doesn't matter what area that is. The framework remains the same. We look at the broad picture and then really start to hone in on where those issues really lie at their root.
And then for you, what are like the most important data sources that companies already have in-house but are fundamentally underusing or maybe just ignoring? What are like really the key data sources that you believe that companies should be looking at more?
Unit economics is a big one. I think so many brands do not understand, just circling back to the profitability thing, they don't understand how much money they're making on each product, which causes them to overspend on acquisition, which leaves them scratching their head when they say, well, hang on a second, our Facebook ads are performing in this particular way, and don't get me started on ROAS as a metric. We're saying, our ROAS is 20. Great. So you're returning $20 of sales for every one that you're spending. That's great. But the reality is you don't make that much margin on your product. So you're overspending on acquiring somebody, and the profit's just not there for you. They look at ROAS, they look at sales data and say these are both really positive numbers, and they can be. But one is a return on ad spend and one is revenue. There's no profit in that equation in any of those numbers. So unit economics is an enormous one. And I had a conversation with a client recently where I asked him, on average, I think they've got about 20 SKUs on their site. On average, what is your gross margin on this? Oh, I don't know, about 30%. And I went digging into it. And then the question arose. I said, your margin's 70% on this. Why aren't you making money? Because they just had no idea of how much money they were making per product, and they were making way more than they thought. So they were taking more money than they even realized, but they still weren't profitable because they were just overspending in so many places, and it just got out of control. So that's really kind of the first one, and then the second one is the customer data, because that's the key to unlocking better acquisition, which leads to better conversion, which leads to better retention. It's that kind of infinite loop of improvement. So they're the two really for me that I want to get stuck into straight away.
Which customer data are you talking about? Or like the few really big ones that matter?
For me, the segmentation is key. So I always want to get started on RFM segmentation. And this is nothing new. It used to be done in back in like the 80s when people were doing mail shots and things like that, like physical through the post.
It's actually refreshing hearing someone in the e-commerce world talk about RFM. It's so underused, and I feel like all of the traditional direct marketing metrics seem that have sort of been forgotten in the new age of Klaviyo and other tools.
But I think we rely so much on automation, and it's great. But like AI, you need to feed it the right prompt in order to get it to do what you want it to do. And I think personalization for me is the kind of pinnacle of where we should be headed from an e-commerce perspective, and it should be a one-to-one website. The website I see should be very different from the website you see, based on my buying history, my browsing data, what I've looked at on other sites. Everything that I do online, I'm leaving a footprint. And we need to be able to leverage that, but not in a creepy way, and not overuse it either, because the problem we then have is I just start to see the same thing everywhere I go, and it makes no difference. So it's about subtle personalization, but personalization to that specific person. So I want to look at RFM data, which gives me their buying history. It gives me monetary spend. It tells me the areas they're interested in. So I'm interested in that first and foremost. And then really I'm interested in the product piece associated with the customer. So what products are the best customers buying, and why? And that can only be answered then if you start to go down talking about jobs to be done. There's a guy called Bob Meister who talks a lot about jobs to be done, and it's really understanding the pushes and pulls around why people make the decisions that they make, and that might be buying a product, it might be buying a property, any number of decisions that we make are all based around a job that we want to get done, and it might not be specific to that intended use of the product. There's a study that somebody did. I think it was one of the US companies was selling a lot of sort of tape, like sellotape, sticky tape type stuff, in India, I think it was. And they're thinking, oh great, there's people really using our product there, but they didn't understand the purpose that it was being used for. What was happening is, you and I might buy it to like wrap parcels and things like that. What was happening is kids in India were going and buying it, and they were using it to make cricket balls. So they were using the tape and bundling it up to make a makeshift cricket ball. They didn't realize that was what was causing this enormous spike in sales. As soon as they did, they can then start marketing to that and pitching the product for these different things. So I think understanding your customers, understanding your best customers, the products they buy, and then their motivations. And you can only do that by asking them. And I think we're in an age now where we're a bit timid, we're a bit scared to ask people for their opinions directly. We don't want to have conversations. We think, oh, we'll just send them an email. It'll be easier. But actually, do you know what? There's probably a load of equity in reaching out to your best customers and saying, hey, can we really value your opinion? Can we have a chat? Those people are probably delighted to give you their time. And do you know what? You can surprise and delight them with something, a product, a gift, a voucher, whatever you want to do, making them feel part of your community. And I think that's the other part for this year. If we're talking about retention and we're talking about profit, we need to talk about community, because ultimately that's what you want to build. You want to build a community of people who are invested in your brand, whether they are purchasing once now and once in 6 months or 12 months. We need to make sure that they feel part of a community, and in that you can keep them engaged. It's way easier than trying to reacquire them.
So talking with customers, and hopefully getting the customers to start talking with each other and start creating something beautiful and nicer with you as sort of the maybe the moderator or the gatekeeper in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talk also a lot about creating these infinite loops where you get the data, use the data to inform your new customer acquisition. How does that work in real life? How could you create more of these infinite loops?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's leveraging your data, and this is where I can't say enough that all merchants and all brands are sitting on a gold mine of data. You just have to know what you're looking for, and not everybody is mining for the same thing. So you want to know, okay, today, this month, this quarter, we are mining for this particular mineral, this particular nugget of information in our data. How can I go about it? And regardless of where you go, all of it sits in your retention data. That's the key to everything, because everybody's fighting over trying to get first party data, and all of these things. Zero party is great if you can leverage it and start to use it, but you still don't know exactly who that customer is. As soon as you can get them to part with some data, then your life becomes infinitely easier. So anything that you can do that's going to start you on a journey of improvement is going to work. But improvement for me is completely cyclical. And it's like learning something. As soon as you learn something, it seems really obvious and you wish I'd known that yesterday, but you don't know what you're going to learn tomorrow. So how do you use your knowledge and your data and all of these sorts of things to help inform the next decision and keep growing? And the infinite loop piece really comes when, how can I marry one piece of knowledge with another? How can I get them to inform each other? How can I get my retention data to inform my acquisition data? How can I get my acquisition data to inform my conversion data? How can I start to join all of these pieces together so that they are helping the next piece in the puzzle develop and grow? And how can I then feed that back? So lookalike audiences is a great way to start from your retention data. There's so many tools out there that will allow you to do that, and then feeding that into your acquisition agency or your acquisition channel. Looking into the channels, which channel works best for me with my brand. Again, it doesn't matter what my competitor's doing. If my audience is on Instagram, or my audience is on Google, or my audience is on Facebook, go after it there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if somebody else is doing TikTok. If TikTok doesn't work for you, don't use it. You got to play smart, and then just start to use that data. Okay, they're coming in, and they either are or aren't converting. How do I use that to inform the next step in the process, and then how do I make it better tomorrow?
Just any specific tools that you would recommend people use? Because, okay, imagine you're starting with this from scratch. So you're walking into a company, they have all of this data, but it's lying there, it's underutilized, it's not analyzed, it's not in any type of usable format. What tools do you use to then actually start digging into all of this stuff and turn data into actual information and meaning?
The biggest one for me is I use Reveal from OmniConvert. So you can plug this in straight into your store. If you have a Shopify store, you can just plug it straight in via the App Store. If you have a different setup, you can get that working for you. And what this does is it goes through and it pulls all of your historic data, and it uses that to give you metrics now. It will also help give you projections for the future, but it helps break down the various segmentation for you. If you want to get really deep, you can start to look into buying patterns and buying habits and likelihoods of people doing certain things and predictions. But that's really the go-to. Everybody has Google Analytics, and with the best will in the world, it's horrible. It's horrible to use because it's like trying to drink from a fire hydrant. There's so much information that is not broken down in a manageable format for you. And then not only that, it never marries with any other data. You know, Google Analytics seems to be a law unto itself in that respect. And now we're talking about a switch to GA4. I think it's just going to cause so many headaches for people.
I think it's already causing them, but what can you do? I mean, it is one piece of the puzzle, but not the whole piece. As you think, the majority of companies make the mistake of, just trying to find that ultimate source of truth, that ultimate measurement tool that just doesn't exist. I mean, the ultimate source of truth is your P&L. It's your EBITDA, it's your customer data. It's not any type of no attribution software can solve for today's measurement problems. Everyone promises that they do, but it's become a technological impossibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in the end, it's just your P&L, your customer data that really holds the truth, and everything else is just a bit of signals left and right that we use to make smarter decisions still, and still better having some data versus having no data.
Absolutely. I think it's knowing which pieces to use, right? And if there's anything I could say to anybody, please go and have a look at your unit economics. Please go and have a look at your gross margin and how much you're making on each product, and really interrogate those.
Okay, Jason, thank you very much. This was really, really insightful. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I just think it's super exciting times in e-commerce right now, partly because of the challenges that people face. There's opportunity in those challenges. I think I'm speaking to lots of brands at the moment who are finding it quite overwhelming. But I guess my message would be that view it as an opportunity, because there's a shake-up happening in the market, and like everything, there will be winners and losers. If you play smart, you can probably start to stack the chips in your favor, and looking into your retention data and looking at how you can leverage that across your whole value chain. You're going to really make a difference to your business and start to put yourself, with a win in your favor rather than the other way around.
I think that is a beautiful way to wrap this up. Thank you very much. This was a pleasure, and good luck to everyone out there fighting the good e-commerce fight. Take care.
And because you want more strategic e-commerce growth insights, conversations, and training, visit notblur.com.